This meeting or event is being recorded. Please accept the recording of the event. And today we're here to listen to Shana Klein, Kent State University professor, who's going to deliver the lecture, Banana Crimes and Consumption, A Visual History of the US Banana. As you may already know, this program is part of the free online series programming hosted by La Fiebre del Banano, Banana Craze, which is a project created and curated by Juanita Solano and myself. It is a digital humanities research project that investigates the legacy and the impact of the banana monoculture in Latin America through the 20th century as seen through the lens of contemporary art. The platform, which is completely online, includes a digital exhibition, a virtual archive, and a series of online programming that we have been hosting since the project launched in October 2021. And we're very grateful to La Universidad de los Andes for hosting our platform under their website. I'm Blanca Serrano. I am project director at the Institute for Studies on Latin American Art, ISLA, and my colleague and co-curator and creator of Banana Craze is Juanita Solano Roa, assistant professor at Universidad de los Andes in the Department of Art History. As I mentioned, today we have Shana Klein, Kent State University professor, and just a brief recap of how the meeting is going to take place. Juanita will introduce Shana, and then Shana will deliver her lecture. We'll have like 10-15 minutes for questions at the end of her lecture. Juanita and I will begin by asking Shana a few questions, and then we will open it to the public. So we really encourage you to participate in the conversation and ask your questions. We ask that you please mute your microphones during the presentation, and then you may either pose your questions through the chat feature in Zoom or raise your hand and speak through the video feature. And finally, we are very thankful for Equifruit, Canada's leading fair trade banana company, for supporting this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Blanca. Well, it is a pleasure for us to have here Shana Klein. As Blanca said, she's a professor at Kent State University and holds a PhD in art history from the University of New Mexico, where she completed her dissertation and now book, The Fruits of Empire, Art, Food, and the Politics of Race in the Age of American Expansion. This book demonstrates how pictures of food were not mere decoration, but a platform for artists and viewers to discuss heated debates over race and citizenship. In 2021, Klein's book won the CCAG Award for Excellence in Scholarly Research and Publication. She also has been awarded several fellowships for her research at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, among others. She has presented her research in a number of peer-reviewed journals and podcasts, and she teaches classes that bring together American art, material culture, and social justice. So please join me in welcoming Shana, and the mic is yours.
Thanks so much. Let me first start off by extending my gratitude to Juanita and Blanca. I am so amazed by the exhibition that they created. I wish I had had this when I was writing my dissertation. Like, it is like this encyclopedic kind of inventory of the banana and art. And I love how they approach the exhibit, and I love how they don't shy away from a lot of the histories around the banana that are really disturbing and nasty and miserable. And I just think they deal with it in a thoughtful way. So I'm so thankful to have this opportunity and to be cited on their exhibition page and to have this kind of collaborative opportunity. I'm just, again, really amazed by your work. So I'm going to share my screen. While I do this, let me also say that I'm recovering from a cold, so I might sound a little congested and I might cough a few times, but hopefully we can get past that. So today's presentation is called Banana Crimes and Consumption, a Visual History of the US Banana. And this draws from the 4th chapter of my book called The Fruits of Empire. I'll give you like the elevator pitch of my book, that basically it's in this text that I argue that foods were not just delicious to paint, just mouth-watering to look at, that representations of food were also sparking conversations about national expansion and about empire. And the way in which they do this is because where fruits were grown. So fruit in particular pressed upon these conversations because They were being grown in places that were considered frontier lands or borderlands that many North Americans wanted to colonize. And then the people who were harvesting fruit and growing fruit were often immigrant laborers or laborers of color. And so they were the targets of conversations about racism and citizenship. So fruits, I argue, created this platform for people to talk about race and more. So the banana definitely enters these conversations, right? So the banana was made more accessible by the United Fruit Company, which I'm going to talk about, and really at a disastrous cost, at the expense, a terrible expense of so many people in Latin America and politics in Latin America. So I want to think about, how do we eventually get to the United Fruit Company? What do images of the banana look like before and after? And so I'll spend like the, say, 20, 25 minutes or so talking about historic representations of the banana in art. And then we'll get to the juicier and like my more favorite topic, which is to talk about the banana in contemporary art. Okay, so let's start with this first image to give you a sense of what Americans, North Americans were painting in the late 19th century when they're painting representations of food. We can see something like this, bananas and lemons. So bananas are not indigenous to North America. The fruit was originally grown in parts of Asia, later spread to Africa and the Americas, by colonists. But apart from a few instances, North Americans rarely encountered the banana. There's some documentation about red bananas coming from Cuba, but for most of the 19th century, they were really this exotic, rare fruit for North Americans. It is really difficult to grow the banana in North America. You need a truly tropical climate. And so the borders of the United States are semi-tropical. They're not like a truly equatorial climate that you need for the banana. And so American boosters and developers realized that it would be easier to import the banana from Latin America rather than try to grow it on a large scale in the United States. Now, there are two things that happen to help expand the banana trade in the US. One of them is the closing of the American Civil War. So this opens up trade routes and ports to enable greater exchange between the Americas. And then we also have advancements in refrigeration. I mean, this was really game changing because now you could ship the banana and import it from far distances and have it refrigerated to enable the delaying of the banana's ripening so that it still got to the United States fresh and edible. So advancements in refrigeration, and then also icebox technologies. I talk about this in the classroom. I tell my students how revolutionary ice was. Like, we take it for granted today, but ice in the 1800s was really this like spectacular revolution that helped refrigerate and chill foods until they were ready for sale. And so this marshaled in a new era in banana production, that now fresh fruit could be delivered to the United States from further distances than ever before, that ever seemed imaginable. So what I find really interesting about the banana in North American art is that it really seems to closely parallel the same period of time when Americans start to encounter the banana. So for instance, we have this painting by John George Brown. It's undated, but like I just told you, most North Americans are not accessing the banana until around the Civil War and after. So even though we can't date this painting, we can still use the banana as evidence in this painting to suggest that it's probably around the late 1800s when Brown painted this canvas. And so we have a kind of sweet image here of a bootblack, so someone who is probably of the lower classes, especially as indicated by what he's wearing. And we see him encountering the banana, right? He's holding it. It looks like maybe this was the first time that he ever had one, apart from the peel that you can see on the bottom of the composition. And it also shows him holding it upside down. Okay, so when we eat a banana, right, that nub is usually at the top and then we peel it open. He's holding it upside down, which indicates that he might be unfamiliar with this fruit, which would have been pretty expensive for someone of his station in society. I have a statistic here. The banana was a rare fruit in the 1870s when only 1 of every 10,000 residents in the US had ever tasted it. So in some ways, people may have seen the banana in art before they ever tasted it or before they ever held one, which I'm also always encouraging more scholars to study food and art, because in so many ways, representations of food might have been more popular and widely circulated than the actual fruits themselves, because this was considered a luxury good still by the 1860s and 70s. So there were also a lot of stories that I found from the 19th century about people experiencing the banana for the first time, about people mistaking the banana for other foods. One common mistake was the sausage. I read a few stories about how people thought that the banana was at first a sausage, which might seem very kind of far-fetched, right? Like, how could you mistake the banana for a sausage? But it's because in the 1800s, most North Americans ate the Gros Michel, which was a different variety than we eat today. Today, we eat the Cavendish, which is a more slender yellow banana that we see here. Apparently, it's a lot less tasty than the Gros Michel, which is what most people ate in the 1800s, which is this thicker, sturdier banana. It was known for being easier to ship in that it was more impervious to bruising. And so perhaps that story about people mistaking the banana for a sausage is not so unrealistic, in that the banana people used to eat was a thicker, stouter variety, almost kind of like a sausage. Okay, so Brown's subject is clearly unfamiliar with the banana. He clutches it upside down. What a lot of these paintings don't show are the conditions of labor for the banana. A lot of North American paintings show the banana safely having arrived on tables in the hands of consumers, but what was it actually like to grow, to harvest the banana in Latin America? So I'll let your eyes land on this image while I describe some of that. So cultivating bananas for this international business, it required a complete transformation of the landscape. Laborers had to clear trees, dig rows and rows of irrigation ditches, construct railroad tracks to transport the fruit. This sometimes led in exhausted soil. So once you planted the banana in one spot, you exhausted the soil and you had to find a new location in order to plant it again. Then after the land was prepared, workers applied chemicals to the fruit that in many cases led to serious health problems. And laborers, they also risked their lives when they were planting and growing bananas, because they were doing so alongside poisonous mosquitoes and snakes that could bite and lead to really deadly injuries. Then once the bananas were grown over several months, laborers would cut the fruit, wash it, wrap it in plastic, load it onto cables. And in some ways, this was maybe one of the most difficult tasks, because it's being done under really hot, scorching temperatures with banana clusters and banana hands that weigh up to 100 pounds. So I say all this to suggest that banana cultivation is not fun, it's not easy, it is stressful, it is laborious, and in these instances, it could be deadly, like it could be injurious. Now, like I mentioned a minute ago, paintings in North America don't allude to any of these conditions. So they don't suggest the conditions for production or labor. And what these paintings actually do is naturalize the banana in US homes. So even though a lot of these foods were coming from all over the world, we have sugar cubes and pineapples and bananas next to oranges, even though they're coming from, some are far distances, others are shorter distances, what these paintings serve to do is to assimilate fruits like the banana. The banana, which was considered an immigrant fruit in North America, an exotic fruit, that by painting them into American dining rooms, and by painting them with these dining room silverware and tablecloths and all the accessories of the US home, you're essentially helping to assimilate or naturalize the Latin American banana in the United States. And you're also, these still life paintings are flaunting the US commercial access to places abroad, to far places in far distances. And still life painters are not the only ones doing this. Cookbook authors too. So this was another form of assimilating the banana, of incorporating it in the American home, that you can find cookbook recipes for banana jello, banana pie, banana ham rolls, banana fritters. So kind of like uniquely American recipes in the United States are now starting to incorporate the banana into cookbooks. And that's another way of helping America's commercial expansion and helping these companies by supporting the banana and integrating them into your daily life. Now, the Victorian period in the United States also sees the creation of new silverware and entirely new utensils around the banana. We're looking at a glass banana bowl here, or a banana pedestal, a banana boat. There's a lot of different terms for this instrument. There were a lot of different purposes for the banana boat. One of them was to separate the banana from other fruits. So that was perceived as a way to help the banana from rotting more quickly. But also, this was a way of literally elevating the fruit. And I found a lot of quotes from the 1800s in which there were terrible stereotypes and caricatures of Latin American people launched by people in the United States, saying that they didn't want to eat the banana like people in the tropics do. And that people in the tropics, all they have to do is roll out of their lazy hammock and idly go to a banana tree and pick the fruit and eat it. And people in the United States wanted to distinguish themselves from those rituals. They elevated the banana. They cut the banana with knives. They baked the banana into recipes. These were all rituals that people in the United States created as a way to elevate the kind of ceremony around eating the banana and to distinguish themselves in what I think are, racist ways from people in the quote tropics. The idea of trying to civilize the banana. Now, excuse me, the recipes that I showed you a few minutes ago, that was coming from this cookbook, A Short History of the Banana, a few recipes for its use. This is from the United Fruit Company. Now, the United Fruit Company becomes one of the largest scale banana companies at the turn of the century. And this is their first cookbook. And we're looking at the cover of their cookbook from 1904, in which they are promising to bring bananas within reach to all people in the United States. And we can talk a lot about this cookbook cover. Like, this cover could sustain an entire presentation on its own. But essentially, we have women at the center who are flaunting the banana as this exotic fruit, but also one that is like safe and sanitized to eat. I also want to just take a moment to recognize that women are often at the center of banana advertisements. Women are also the ones who are writing banana cookbooks. This one's by Janet Mackenzie Hill. And women are also the ones who are purchasing bananas in the United States. So they are considered the authorities on food, the directors of the home. So women are in charge of purchasing food like the banana. And so, I mean, Juanita and Blanca maybe can speak to this, but so much of banana scholarship is about men. It's about men as the business owners, as the importers, as the railroad owners, but women are really central to this operation too. They were in the advertisements, they were writing the cookbooks, they were purchasing the banana. So you can't write out women from scholarship because they are also helping to shape this commercial empire. Okay, now this whole cookbook really helps demonstrate United Fruit's mission to accumulate more land and power abroad. Let me also say that United Fruit, it was started by 3 entrepreneurs, and it develops pretty quickly in the 20th century and eventually has this stranglehold over the banana industry for more than the first half of the 20th century. In the 1920s and 30s, the United Fruit Company owned more than 3 million acres of land in Central America and the Caribbean. Okay, so you can see some of this desire to colonize or conquer land in their cookbook. So here we're looking at the last page, I believe, of the cookbook, in which we see this like white mermaid who is pointing her finger off into the horizon. She's sitting above this map that is mapping United Fruit steamship lines and where they're importing and transporting from. This is a very colonial language that United Fruit is using. So if you were a North American in the early 1900s, you would have been familiar with this gesture, the gesture of the pointed outstretched hand. You see this over and over again in frontier art. In American art, that was all about manifest destiny and this idea that people in the United States are divinely endowed with the right to conquer the Western frontier and to colonize land all over the world. And so here's an example of Daniel Boone. He's looking out at the San Francisco Bay. So the same outstretched arm that is suggesting that, pointing to the land that they want to conquer, is being used, this outstretched arms being used by United Fruit, and again, over a map that I think makes it really clear what they want to do, that it shows their mission to expand into Latin America. Now, the company doesn't just kind of do this on a small scale. They are trying to control as many arteries as possible, political arteries in Latin America, in the places where they have set down banana groves and banana plantations. And so the word that I use when I describe United Fruit to my students in the classroom, the word I use is ruthless. Okay, United Fruit was ruthless in this mission through intimidation, through violence, through disappearances, murders, squashing riots and protests. They tried to secure as much control as possible over areas in Latin America in order to maximize their profits and secure their land holdings. And they even had support from the CIA. Okay, so they also exercised several coups throughout Latin America. And I would imagine most of the people listening to this talk are aware of this history and know a lot about it, but my students are often really surprised. Like, they had no idea that the banana was something so political, and that this fruit company had the support of the CIA to intervene over and over again in Latin American politics. So one of the most, I think, unsettling examples of this is what happens to the elected president of Guatemala in 1951, Jacobo Arbenz. So Arbenz was elected, and he has this more democratic mission to distribute large land holdings from United Fruit back to peasant farmers and local farmers. And not surprisingly, maybe United Fruit was not happy with this more egalitarian policy. This put money and land at stake for the company. And so to prevent the passing of these laws and this agrarian reform that was being proposed by Arbenz, they overthrow the president. Okay, so this is a coup in Guatemala with the CIA, and it hurts and harms and murders, at least hundreds of people, and has this political motivation to also spread capitalism in Guatemala and to squash any threats relating to communism. That's like a very skeletal, bare bones summary of what happened in Guatemala. It's a much larger and more complex history, but that's all to say that United Fruit was ruthless in trying to control the politics of these regions, and they have support from the government, from the CIA in North America. Okay, let's move on to the second part of this talk now, because now that we've established what kind of more historic images of the banana look like in US art, I want to think more broadly in the Americas about a lot of artists who are revisiting this history and are grappling with it, because there are so many contemporary artists in Latin America and beyond who are looking back to this history and using their art to try to confront these really disturbing stories and messages. So that includes the work of Moises Barrios. So Barrios is a contemporary Guatemalan artist. Here we're looking at banana toys, in which we see 5 or 6 toy soldiers defending these large-scale bananas. They're hoisting their fists and they're raising their arms in the air. So there's kind of this defensive posturing about them. We also have this very steep diagonal across the picture plane that creates a kind of unsteady feeling for the viewer, in my perspective. And I think that Barrios is making a lot of intentional decisions here, okay? Barrios could have depicted a much more naturalistic, photorealistic depiction of warfare. But instead, he exaggerates the scale of the bananas. He uses toy soldiers and toy airplanes and other images to talk about the absurdity, the irony, and the misery that all of this warfare and damage was caused for such a bright and cheery and sunny fruit. He also reminds viewers that bananas are like sugar, they're like petroleum and oil, that there has been a political battleground fought on the banana throughout the history of the Americas, particularly in the 20th century. And so his paintings get us thinking about that. Let me also show you his work with the Banana Republic clothing store. So he's also inspired by the clothing display windows of Banana Republic stores, this fashion brand that was invented in the 1970s. And he paints the mannequins in the window to get us thinking about, why is there a clothing line named after banana republics. Now, first, the term banana republic is a racist slur, okay? It is a derogatory term that is meant to characterize regions that are qualified by like political instability and destruction and corruption, as if they like can't, as if these countries like can't save themselves. So it's a racist slur that was invented in the 1900s to launch, miserable caricatures against Latin American countries. So already we have a problem that this term is being used for a fashion line, but also banana republics are such a damaging system that has caused an environmental impact, a social impact with indigenous removal, and also the forced removal of local farmers off of their land. It also has a terrible economic impact in the redistribution of national products away from local production. Okay, so there's so many injurious effects to this banana republic system. So Barrios urges viewers in the United States to consider, why do we have something that is fashionable or trendy? Why are we naming a clothing line after something that has been so destructive? Let's move to the work of Jose Alejandro Restrepo. So in this installation, he's also looking at the banana wars, and he is considering the abuses of the United Fruit Company throughout history. So here we have banana stalks that are hanging like lynched bodies that are tortured and hanging from a tree, almost like. Apparently, I've never seen this in person, but a lot of critics, when they saw this installation in person, they remarked on the smell of the bananas, that apparently it was so putrid and it was like so kind of unsavory to smell these rotting bananas. That's what a lot of viewers and critics left the installation with. And I think that's a really appropriate metaphor for the decay and for the withering kind of cultures and societies that happen with the deaths at the hands of the United Fruit Company. So this is a specific reference to attacks in Cienega, Colombia in 1928 by the Colombian government with the United Fruit Company. They were trying to squash a group of laborers that were protesting unfair wages, unethical working practices. And so he is creating this memorial to that massacre. And it's a little hard to see, but there are also mirrors underneath some of these banana stalks. And so you can see yourself in some of this installation. And I think that makes us question as the viewer, how are we complicit? I personally eat a banana almost daily, maybe every other day. And so seeing artwork like this makes you question, like, how, what expense am I eating the banana at? Like, at what cost? And, it makes me more introspective about the history of the banana, especially when you see yourself in the installation, like with these mirrors. Minerva Cuevas. Okay, so she does the Del Monte Bananeras, which is an installation at the Guggenheim. And notice how with Del Monte, she spells it with 2 T's, not 1. That's to reference the Guatemalan president, Montt, from 1982 to 1983. Let me give you just a brief history. He was only president for 2 years, only president for 2 years. And under his instruction, he destroyed 400 towns. He drove 20,000 rural people out of their homes, killed more than 50,000 indigenous people. Okay, so his legacy is one of corruption, of this aggressive military policy, and one that really mirrors what fruit companies were doing in Latin America. I have a close-up of the brand that she is mocking or imitating. It's a little hard to see, but under the Del Monte logo, it has the word criminal, and then writing beneath it, the red and yellow insignia are struggles for land. Excuse me. So she's drawing out the similarities between Del Monte and the Del Monte Company and banana companies like United Fruit that had the support of governments to kick people off of their land and to squash some of these protests, all to support the financial gains of these companies. Let me try to bring it on a lighter note now to show you the work of Luciano. So Luciano is a contemporary artist who also plays with of the fruit, bananas and plantains. In 2006, he took an actual plantain and plated it in platinum. So platinum is that same material used to plate for like best-selling record albums and musical albums. So it's something that we think of as costly, as expensive, something that we gild because it's like a nice, expensive material. So he's conceptualizing the plantain like this expensive piece of jewelry or a gem or a treasure. And I love how in this photograph, he puts it on this young boy who's cocking his head to the side. He's using his thumb to pull out the banana chain. And so it's like he's elevating again the plantain to jewelry, to a treasure, to something that you can flaunt, like this banana bling. And what I think adds another element to this work of art is that the plantain, which is inside this necklace or that's inside this sculpture, is rotting. Okay, so it's decaying and it's rotting. And I think that makes for an interesting metaphor for the decay or exploitation of natural resources in Latin America as a result of US intervention, or also the fears and anxieties that we have around the banana. So in the early 2000s, there were a number of articles that were talking about the extinction of the Cavendish, that because of the asexuality of our banana and because of the way that it's been cloned, it is more susceptible to becoming extinct and to becoming injured by diseases than maybe other variants of the past. And so there are all these articles like, are we gonna have bananas, the uncertain future of our favorite fruit? And so thinking about the decaying banana in this sculpture also makes me wonder, one day, will the banana or the plantain, which is like this everyday object for so many people around the world, will that too become this elevated object? Like, will that too become rare and expensive once more, like it was in the 1800s? Let's look at Mendoza's work. Okay, so Mendoza, he's a Dominican artist. He created Bananhattan, which is a map of New York City metro system. Obviously, it's in the shape of this yellow banana. And he shows brown spots loosely situated around the subway line, so the metro lines here. And he's also showing where large communities of immigrants from banana growing countries like the Dominican Republic have settled, where they've immigrated to. And then he has this huge circle here pointing to "we are here." So this is areas of Washington Heights, Spanish Harlem, where many Dominicans reside. And so I interpret this as like a celebration of the mobility of immigrants from the banana tropics and how they've come to New York City, how they've shaped the United States and influenced cities like New York. Valdez is another contemporary artist who creates a lot of artworks around the banana. So this is a portrait of his brother from 2005. And I love how he shows his brother this portrait that is just like consumed by bananas. The whole portrait has, banana shapes making up his ears, his eyes, his hair, and so on. And what I also think is unique about this work is it makes you think how the banana is like a brushstroke. Like it's really useful as this material evidence to create a work of art, that there's almost something impressionistic about this painting and the way that he uses thick, choppy brushwork from the banana. But also the idea that this sitter's identity has become consumed by the fruit, like his whole portrait is consumed by the banana, something that is this essential food of everyday life that figures into several national dishes in the Caribbean and again beyond. I'm going to show you a few more works. This is by Davany Banks. He's a colleague of mine at Kent State. He does incredible work with glass. And here he's created his self-portrait. And Davin's from the Cayman Islands. And so he talks about how bananas, plantains, they're everywhere. Like they grow in people's backyards and, they're part of all of these dishes that you eat, on an everyday scale. But at the same time, he also grapples with the colonial nature of the banana and the colonial history of it. And so I read this work as a juxtaposition. So is he using the bananas here as like a necklace? Is he elevating it as a piece of jewelry? Or do these bananas form a stranglehold, right? They're kind of sitting right below his throat in a way that could be kind of suffocating or strangling. It makes me think also about the way that food is used in culture, not to uplift communities, but how it's also been historically used to degrade people. There are many racist associations with terms like Latino. So that has been a derogatory term to describe Dominican and Puerto Rican immigrants in the United States. This goes into longstanding prejudices, like I mentioned earlier, about people from the Latin American tropics being lazy or uncivilized. Other foods have also been used for racist slurs, including beanie and brownie. They're derogatory terms to describe people of Mexican descent. We also have kraut that was used after World War II to describe people of German ancestry. And then cracker is a term I think still used today to pejoratively describe white Americans of like a lower class. So I'm going to wrap up this conversation now, and just to say that, you know, representations of food are everywhere, right? There's something like so universal about them, but I really think not about how they only like celebrate or uplift certain communities, but in this way, how they've been used to launch racist ideas and anxieties about people, and how they've been used to degrade people and not to uplift certain communities, and that foods carry some really painful and traumatic histories with them. I could spend so much time talking about all these contemporary artists who are drawing upon the banana. And Juanita and Blanca, I don't know if you have any room to add to your fantastic exhibition, but if you don't have any of these artists inventoried, I think it would be great to add them, including Victor Anteriano. So I've gone to know him over social media. His work is really fantastic, and that it's so pointed in dealing with the history of the United Fruit Company. So we have this Uncle Sam-like figure. Instead of like smoking a cigar, you know, he's holding a banana, a peel in the other. And here we're looking at areas of Latin America that have been impacted by the United Fruit Company, this, you know, empire, right? He calls it like Caribbean empire. He also includes this caricature of Chiquita. And there's a long history too of Chiquita as being someone who helps normalize the banana in US homes, but also plays on these stereotypes and, you know, exploitations of caricatures associated with Latin American people. And so these artists today are doing fantastic work in wrestling with these histories. And I think it's so appropriate that they're using it through the channel of art, because like I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, the banana has always been in North American art and art throughout the Americas. And United Fruit very cleverly and astutely used visual representation to further their empire. So now we have this kind of what I think of as like a rebuttal, like a backlash to some of these systems of power. Okay, I will wrap up my conversation here. I feel like I've been talking for a while, and I would love any feedback, any questions or comments. If you have more advice for where to take this project, please let me know. A good way to keep in touch with me is on Instagram. So you can follow me at The Fruits of Empire. Once a week, I will show an image of food and kind of deconstruct it in art. And then I also, you know, have this book out, and, you know, normally my press wants me to like publicize it and give you this discount code. I'm actually here to tell you it's like so tragically expensive. Like maybe don't buy my book. It's worth like too much money is the way that it's priced. But if you do buy it, use this discount code. And also know that all of the book royalties for this project are going to the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. Okay, so I'm not keeping a cent from the book. It's all going to the CIW, which is an incredible organization that fights for farm workers, for immigrant farm workers in the United States, trying to eliminate abuses on farms and fields and really support those who grow and harvest our food. Okay, I'll end there. Curious to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shana. This is fascinating. And thank you so much for instructing us also on this previous history of the banana in the US. I think it's fascinating. And we have certainly learned a lot from this talk, but also from reading you. And I really recommend the book. So I wanted to start by saying that it's fascinating how you touch on so many issues, gender, race, the materiality of the artworks. And I just wanted to ask you, how did you come to this project? Like, how did you find fruits such a fruitful way of speaking about the history of American art? And, you know, to give us just like a sense of how you decided to focus on this.
Yeah, so actually the three of us were talking before this chat started about our graduate programs. And I really think of this book as like a love letter to the University of New Mexico. That's where I got my doctoral training. That's where I took classes on Central American art history, Native American art history. I'm so proud to come from the University of New Mexico, where so much of this content is not taught in the United States. It is completely, pushed to the side, marginalized in our exhibitions, in our textbooks. So I have a very unique education that I'm really proud of. And that's where in my one of my art history classes, I learned about Barrios, the work of Moises Barrios. And it got me thinking like, oh, the banana is so politically charged. Like, when does the banana start emerging in American art, which was my specialty, like art of the United States in the 1800s. And once I started seeing the banana emerge, it became very clear that it was mirroring and almost like documenting in real time how Americans were trying to colonize and exploit banana growing countries and banana growing regions. And so it just got me thinking about the greater political charge of fruit and how, because of where fruit is grown and who's growing fruit, it is really creating all these conversations around race and citizenship that I couldn't ignore. So it's really like this homage to my doctoral training in a sense.
Thank you. And the banana was the one who started the whole thing. Yes. So it's interesting to hear that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shana, for your wonderful talk. And thank you also for sharing the code to purchase your book and for clarifying that you're donating the proceeds to this great organization. And also thank you for your great suggestions of contemporary artists. Many of them are in our platform, but not all of them. And I want to let everyone know that Juanita and I managed to upload 100 artworks to our platform when it was launched last fall, but we definitely plan to keep the virtual exhibition growing. So there's gonna be like a second batch of uploading happening probably next fall. Ideally like at least once a year, and we've already got a very long list of additional works that we would like to include in the platform, and we are for sure adding a few of those you mentioned today, so thank you. And I wanted to ask you, so you showed us US images of bananas from the 19th century and early 20th century, and then we saw contemporary images of bananas done from Latin America. But I was wondering if you could speak a bit about Latin American images of bananas that are not contemporary art. So like 19th century modernism and the avant-garde. Like what was the counterpart to the images of banana as a luxurious object shown in the US? How was banana being portrayed at the same time or a bit later in Latin America?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And one that I actually don't know a lot about. Like that would like warrant, I think, its own dissertation topic, right? Because I think that would be such a useful tool for giving voice to the people that I don't really talk about the project. The first artist that comes to mind is Francisco Oyer. So Oyer is a Puerto Rican artist, and he shows the banana and plantain in a lot of his still life representations and paintings. And he's very much influenced by like a European tradition of painting, but he's showing it in a very kind of nationalist and uniquely Puerto Rican heritage and context. And so I think that was a way of kind of combating, or at least being in conversation with mainstream North American depictions, which were all about assimilating and naturalizing this immigrant fruit. For Oyer, it was not an immigrant fruit, right? It was not exotic. It was like the food of everyday stuff and food fare. So I think we need like so much more research on the Oyers of the 19th century and how artists, like you say, even in modern times, like throughout the 20th century, were showing the banana on their own terms, right, in their own voice and not exoticizing it. Yeah, and I think also what you're saying points to some of the flaws of my own research. Like, my research looks at the empire, like it looks at the archive and all of the archival evidence that I have that are speaking more so to the voices of that greater empire. And it's a lot harder, but more rewarding to get the voices who are working against, or like who are trying to reject that voice of empire. Does that make sense, Blanca?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm not an expert in like Latin American avant-garde. I focus more on contemporary art, but I wouldn't say that in the avant-garde there was like a rejection to the notion of empire, but almost on the contrary. I think, as you were mentioning about Oyer, there's like a nationalist pride in depicting with an avant-garde language topics and visual aspects of the local landscape, including like architecture, fruit, or yeah, like local types. So I don't know, like the work of Tarsila do Amaral includes a lot of banana leaves, or Amelia Pelaez in Cuba also depicts bananas. And I think that's part of like trying to come up with a modernism in painting, like a local style of modernism that includes like what's considered avant-garde in Europe, like the language of Cubism, let's say, with local subject matters. And I think that's done from, I don't know, Juanita, what you would add to the discussion, but I think that's done from like a pride perspective. And I'd say it's until the horrifying effects of the UFC are seen that artists, also coinciding with the growth of conceptualisms in Latin American art, start criticizing the banana, right? I don't know. Juanita, what would you add? I'm really curious to
Yes,
hear your
no,
opinion.
I agree with everything you have said. And I think it's also fascinating what you pointed out, Shana, because we also have struggled with finding primary sources or even secondary sources of histories of the banana and empire written from Latin America. There are obviously a couple of books, but it's super interesting that many of our sources actually come from the US. So I think this is also an invitation to think about this history from Latin America and to see how we can, expand that notion and expand that history and that idea. And I think it's fascinating to see how it's actually images, the ones that we have as, as sources to think through these larger history. So yeah, I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, let me also say, just in hearing both of you talk, I'm trying to get more away from binaries. Like I have this kind of lazy pitfall where I think about like rejecting or supporting the empire. And I'm trying to think more comprehensively, like it wasn't so black and white. Like there are nuances and shades and degrees to the way that empire is, being treated here. And so, yeah, I don't think it always has to be this like acceptance or this like counter rejection of empire. And yeah, it's interesting that you say a lot of your sources are coming from the United States. Like I think about, trying to recover the histories of laborers from this time period. Like, if there are ancestors or people we can contact today whose parents or grandparents were, on some of these banana growing plantations, like if they have any, diaries or journals that they can like help us recover people who were working under these terrible conditions.
There's a recent book published by I think he's from Chile. He's a journalist and he wrote a book, Crónicas Bananeras. We are actually hosting a conversation with him next week.
Awesome.
We'll send you, I mean, we're not the ones who are having the conversation, but we're organizing this event. And it's super interesting because he does this crazy research around Latin America, and he contacts one of the farmers who used to work in one of the plantations in Guatemala. And no, he's from Guatemala, but he migrates to Costa Rica. So there's also like this history of migration and racism within Central America. And it's sort of like a primary source where, this man is telling his story. So that's a great resource. I also think there's a problem with the way scholar and these sources circulate, because and I've seen it since I moved back to Colombia, how the things that are published in Latin America circulate less, also because they're written in Spanish. And so there's sort of like a kind of replication of like imperialism within scholarship. Wow. I don't know if this makes any sense. So it's harder to actually find those resources of people who are based in Central America or based in South America and the Caribbean. It's interesting also to see how information circulates.
Wow, that's really mind-blowing. Thanks you for sharing that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, me neither. I'm just like experiencing it firsthand. So it's interesting to think about it. I had another question for you, Shana. I think it's super interesting how, we're all, the three of us, we are trained as art historians, and we are, really used to reading images. I loved your description of the painting of the boy with the banana upside down, because it really, gives us a sense of what images can do and what we can learn from it. But I like to think also of the absence of images. And you kind of mentioned that in your talk, how there are no images of, or very little images of the situation of the workers in the plantations, how that didn't become a trope, how that is not represented. So I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more about that lack of images. Like, what does that mean?
Right. Yeah, I think that's very purposeful. That's really intentional, that it's so hard for me to find images of people actually laboring or growing and harvesting the banana. We have something at Harvard University. They have a collection of United Fruit Company photographs, but from what I've seen of them, they're almost like picturesque. They make the labor look more idyllic and like tropical and easy. And there's a kind of its own colonial set at work, right? And like not showing the most accurate or like the backbreaking labor of cultivating bananas. And so as an art historian, right, like we're all trained in our programs to look closely at images and to look at line, light, space, perspective, like think about all the decisions an artist is making in a composition. But so much of looking at the banana has required me to read what's not there. Like all of the training I have to read inside the picture plane isn't as useful now because I have to read at what's not there, right? Like what's been edited out, what's been cropped out of the picture plane, and perhaps why. Like why might the artist not have shown the labor and pains or even the packaging of the banana that it took to get this imported fruit to the United States. And again, I think it's intentional. You know, Americans don't want to see the labor of the fruit. They just want it to arrive nicely on their tables, and they want to help incorporate it into their domestic empire. And this was a way of Americanizing the fruit by not showing its origins or where it was originally coming from.
Thank you so much, Shana. And one last question, I think, before we open the Q&A to the public, to the audience today. Maybe it's not a question or a comment, or maybe it's an open-ended question, but we have also, of course, noticed how the banana has become like a stereotype and a cliche of the Latin American identity, in terms of like both national identity and the relationship to the notion of the banana republic that you discussed before, but also how the banana is associated to the sexual body and the lazy, not laboring body. So I was wondering if you have any insights on how or why do you think that has become a trope in comparison to other fruits that also originate from Latin America, or other produce like sugar, coffee, cocoa, tobacco, pineapples. Like there are many other fruits, and I think most of them also share a violent history. But it's been the banana that has become like a metaphor of the Latin American body. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh, Blanca, that is such a good question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Like, I wish someone had asked me that when I was writing my book, because you're right. Like, why not another food? Or why not another material object? Why the banana? So I have a few things that came to mind. First of all, Chiquita. I think Chiquita really cemented the banana as part of this like cliche or stereotype, right? She's like this flirty Latin American woman who wears this like, kind of a Carmen Miranda costuming. And she talks in like a thick accent in a way that narrates and sings songs about the banana. And so she conforms to all of these like exoticizing stereotypes of Latin American women. And so I think when that illustration was created in the 1940s, that really cemented the banana as being used as a stereotype and troped object. Another thing that came to mind was the phallic shape of the banana. So just thinking about how the banana might create stereotypes around laziness or lascivity, or like, having like looser sexual mores and like this passionate, fiery, tropical culture in comparison to like the virtuous, like Victorian, puritanical North America. I think maybe even like the phallic shape of the banana might contribute to that. And in fact, in the 1800s, it was inappropriate for women to even eat the banana in public. They purchased it wrapped in foil, cut in slices because of its phallic and sexual nature. So I wonder if that also contributes to the stereotype of that kind of like sexual, passionate Latin American cliche. Those are the two things that come to mind, but you raised such a good point, like why the banana?
Thank you so much for your comments. I hadn't thought so much about Carmen Miranda, but I agree that she like anthropomorphizes or whatever the fruit as a body, right? Like, yeah, that's a great thought. Thank you. So
Or
Juanita,
also,
yeah, sorry.
Oh wait, really quickly, Blanca, remember like Josephine Baker too. So she's not in a Latin American context.
Yeah.
She wears a banana skirt in France and like deals with kind of like the primitive tropics of Africa. So yeah, there's a lot going on with the banana in the turn of the century.
Thank you so much, Shana. So what do you say? Shall we open the Q&A to everyone who's here with us today? Please either use like the raise your hand feature in Zoom or use the chat.
Luis has his hand raised, so you can open your mic and just pose your question, Luis.
Hola, Juanita, Blanca.
Hola, te oímos.
Okay, gracias. Okay, so the question is, well, I was thinking about Chiquita, and first of all, what happened exactly with the branding? Because I've seen in different places that things that when the North American people saw the things that the banana did and that the United Fruit Company did, all they did was just change the name and pretend that yeah, like nothing happened. A and B, I was thinking about some of the images that were created in Britain in relationship with the slavery. I think that you've seen them. They used to have anti-slavery ads on at the papers, and people wore like a coin with a slave that said like you're a human, aren't I? Something like that. I mean, like anti United States slavery. And I was wondering if on your research you have stumbled any image like that against Chiquita, or, well, I mean, from somewhere other than Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. So I want to see those ads, by the way, if you have those anti-labor ads. I know that there's like a whole banana history that's unique to England and Ireland and has, warranted its own books and scholarship. So I'm not too familiar with it, but yeah, I'm sure there were definitely like protest images or anti-labor ads in the United States. That's what I'm trying to kind of treating the work of Moises Barrios and all these other contemporary artists. Like I see them as anti-Chiquita or anti-United Fruit. I kind of treat them as the monuments and memorials to, working against some of these narratives. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there are like banana protest ads, like not that I can think of. There are definitely ones for grape boycotts that I can think of in American history, and other fruits, but I don't know if I can think of any banana ones. Juanita, Blanca? Yeah, I don't know.
No, I'm not familiar with that history. The one thing that comes to my mind is the song. Yes, we have no bananas. We have also been trying to do kind of research within music history because it's super interesting, but images, I am not familiar with that. That's probably something we should begin to do.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I just wanted to. There are small urban artists over here, and I've seen uh, that they do in fact play with the logo of Chiquita and the United Fruit. I mean, maybe that, but yeah, I didn't know either any artists, non-urban artists that did that. Thank you.
Shana, there's a question here on the chat from Ali Berlo. She's asking any thoughts, comments about the banana duct tape on the wall at Art Basel, I think it's pronounced.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the artwork by Mauricio Catalan.
Yeah, I just taught this in class, so it's like top of mind. So yeah, by Catalan, he duct tapes the banana. This was at like Miami Basel, and it like got, you know, so many crowds and people around it. And what's interesting about that work of art is that it disintegrates, right? It decays and deteriorates over time. And so the person who owns that installation work really now just has like a certificate of authenticity for that banana. Like that's what becomes the work of art, not the banana, but the document stating what it was. All that is to say, I don't think Catalan had this on his radar at all, but the idea of that banana being like stripped down, like duct taped and choked and strangled, right? A lot of those contemporary images I showed you had that kind of similar sensation. Like, I think that it really lends itself quite naturally and nicely to grappling with a lot of the politics of United Fruit and More, right? The idea of squashing laborers, of like, you know, quieting protests, of like, you know, putting a stranglehold over someone. I think like the violence of duct taping that banana makes for a really useful metaphor for talking about these histories, though that was definitely not the intention of the artist.
William.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm having a little trouble with my audio. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for the fantastic presentation. I don't have a question. I think what you did was so decisive and creative and thoughtful, and I just want to say thank you for that. I was delighted to hear you mention University of New Mexico, which is my alma mater as well. I finished my undergrad in the art history department there.
No way.
Yeah, I'm a pre-Columbianist myself. I finished at UNM in 2006. And as I was applying for grad schools, I went to my recommenders, and one of them was David Craven, a Marxist revolutionary art historian. And he said, I asked him for advice, and he said, I bet everyone has told you the good things about the places you're applying. Let me tell you about the bad things. And I said, great. And he said, you're thinking about Tulane? Great. You need to know that it's built on the blood money of the United Fruit Company, and that's going to be part of what funds your research. And I said, oh, okay, so you're telling me I shouldn't go to Tulane? And you said, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you have to really own that. You have to embody what that means and your responsibility in that, in receiving those funds. And you have an opportunity as a pre-Columbianist to turn that money around and to use it in a way that leverages the beautiful, the noble, the important things about studying Latin America, and not recapitulating these, same historical patterns, but rather using that money to subvert all of what it stands for. And I thought that was, just such a compelling argument. I ended up not going to Tulane. I made a different decision, but I appreciated that so much that was an opportunity to, highlight the important decision you make as a scholar in the field, which goes to, I think touches on Juanita's point about, broadly surveying and sourcing scholarship that's available, because another experience I had was at the Dumbarton Oaks annual Pre-Columbian Symposium, when they concluded the day-long symposium by saying, this is a great topic for future research. And the former director of the Museo Nacional de Antropología in Mexico City, now a curator at LACMA, she stood up and said, actually, that work has already been done. It's just been done in Spanish, so you haven't read it. And then, dropped the mic, basically.
Yeah,
and
really.
So, again, I mean, I don't mean to ramble, but it's just 2 points that, it shows our responsibility as scholars, not just to, shine a light on topics that need broader, to be broadcast more broadly, but we also, in the decisions we make as scholars along the way, have have to take into account these important social ramifications of what we're doing. So all to say, this is a very inspiring talk, and thank you for hosting it. Thank you for presenting it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was so beautifully said. Let me just first say that David Craven was such a for me. He was both a scholar and a political activist, and a lot of us called ourselves Cravenistas. Like we were like this cold for David Craven. And so this scholarship is definitely in honor of him. And also, he was right, like to be aware of what your money is coming from. Like I've had a lot of decorated scholarships and fellowships, and they are probably not coming from the most savory sources. And so I'm trying to use every opportunity I can to redirect that money, right? Like I'm donating funds or whatever, but that doesn't mean that I'm still not benefiting from it. So it's like this very awkward position to get the pat on the back for donating my royalties, but also feeling like it's not nearly enough. Like we need to do more, obviously, than just where we spend our money. But yeah, and it makes me think of that, this is what I want my project to do. And what I think Banana Craze is doing, it's inspiring more people to take on this scholarship, right? You can see that Blanca and Juanita, they need to re-up their inventory with 100 more images because there are so many artists working on this. We need more students studying this. We need more art historians writing scholarship on this. It's so ripe for new scholarship. And so I hope that's what some of these presentations inspire.
Thank you so much. I would add to that comment that we also need to be aware about where our food is coming from. So just to, close the conversation, I think we're running out of time. So I just wanted to thank you, Shana, and everyone who's here for joining us, for listening to us. And we hope to, change everyone's mind about the history of food, the art history also, as a source of thought. Blanca and I are really fighting for positioning visual culture also as a primary source and as a very important source for thinking. So yeah, I don't know if Blanca, you want to say something to close?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for participating today in the conversation, and thank you especially to Shana for her wonderful talk. And I would like to add to Juanita's comment that that's why we're also very proud to have Equifruit as the supporter of our event, because they not only are a fair trade banana company, but they're really, their goal is not to sell bananas. Their goal is really to change the banana market. So they're really working with local farmers, particularly women, to change the conditions of banana production. So we're very proud to be partnering with them. And that's also part of our vision to do research, to make it more horizontal and to involve with different disciplines and projects. So we're very proud to be partnering with them. And finally, I wanted to let everyone know that since this event is being recorded, it's going to be uploaded to our website tomorrow. So it will be there available for anyone and everyone to watch it anytime. That's part of also of our way of understanding this research project as an ongoing project that is always growing, and that includes multiple voices. So all of our events are recorded and uploaded online, so that the research is not just linear from our perspective, but you can always access other people's contribution to the project. And I think that's all on my side. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you everyone.
Thanks everyone, this was terrific. Keep in touch.